What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Like I said, great guest, man. If you are growing up in the 80s, 90s, you probably grew up with this animated series like we did, the X-Men, the animated series, and Julia and Eric Lewald are here with us to discuss the 90s version of the X-Men animated series. But first things first, real quick plug for the beer segment for me from Smart Mouth Brewing. It is the Drip Cold IPA. Delicious. It's a wicked good right here from Virginia. Lauren, what do you got?
So I got a double IPA from Two Tides in Georgia called Almost Nothing. It's got the little cups in it with the string between. So I was like, oh, well, this is something you would play when you were a kid. And I have it in a dinosaur glass for Savage Land. And of course, I have my trusty Wolverine.
We got Wolverine. Right, we both got Wolverine. Yes.
I always have Wolverine, and my son's Logan. So there's always a Logan running around.
I do have a bunch of the X-Men figures on my Lego shelf behind me. I love that they were coming out with some of those so I can incorporate them into my multiverse of craziness back there.
Well, and watching the show this past few weeks, my son's like, they said Logan again. They said Logan again. So he was very excited to get to watch this for the first time.
We've told you this is your name like many times, man, but Micah is also joining us here tonight. Micah helped connect this interview, make it happen. And Micah is somebody who's been a friend of the show for the last 4 years that we've been really doing this. So Micah, what's up, dude? Thanks for hanging out with us tonight.
Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to hang out with everybody and get to discuss some X-Men. And don't have any beer tonight, but I do have a 7-Eleven coffee.
Listen, but my 8-year-old's been obsessed with 7-Eleven cookies for some reason. He is ready to go for July 11th. For whatever reason, he knows there's going to be a free Slurpee that day, and he does not like it.
My daughter knows that too. And like,
he said, do you know on 7-Eleven there's free Slurpees? I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, we're going to get one. I was like, you can get one before then, but okay, sure. Why not? But anyways, without further ado, we have some two amazing guests, Julia and Eric. Welcome to the show. How are you guys doing tonight? Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's our pleasure, Mac.
Yeah, and thank you so much for reaching out. We appreciate that. We're always happy to beat the drum for good old X-Men, the animated series. And here we are with a new future ahead of us. My gosh.
Absolutely.
It's exciting. We're not going to go into any X-Men 97. However, I do want to ask one question, and did you guys ever think you were going to get to play in this universe ever again?
Oh, I mean, Hollywood is ruthless, and I mean, you can't blame them. There's always a new generation of people coming up and doing stuff, and if they want to reimagine something or they want to do a continuation, it was a bunch of 30-somethings that ended up doing this new show, but it was really thoughtful of them to bring us and our dear pal Larry Houston, who was was a producer director
on the art side.
Yeah. So to clarify, I was the showrunner. I was in charge of the scripts and the stories and setting up the world, and Larry was in charge of all the artists.
And so I was one of the writers on the show.
Yeah. So me and my writers, Larry and his artists, and that was the two teams that they brought the two of us and Larry back as consultants to help. I mean, again,
consulting producers.
Yes. But they did 99.9% of the work. We just kind of looked and said, oh, that looks good to us. Sure, do some more. That was our job on this.
Right on. And so how did you guys get into the world of X-Men back, when this show first aired? How did you guys get into the script writing and the show producing business?
Just want to point out that we're talking way back in 1990.
Yes, we're talking about.
And there's no
internet.
There's no Google. Everything had to be communicated through snail mail or fax machines, where we had to go to CVS Pharmacy to use their fax machine to send stuff to Marvel in New York, because that's where Marvel's main headquarters were.
But before that, we each came out here from other states. I came out from East Tennessee. She came out from Texas, and
to break into Hollywood,
wanting to write for TV and movies. We ended up getting to do it for 30 years, which is pretty cool. It's just
we're
you know what that is?
Yeah, we have some.
I'm trying to turn it off.
It won't let you because it's an emergency.
So
anyway, there's probably an amber alert.
Yeah, or
weather.
Possible.
Or Marvel was buzzing. They heard
they heard where I got. That was Disney coming down on. No, so we came out here and
we met.
We met at Disney.
At Disney.
So I broke in the business in the middle 80s.
I got in '88.
Writing for Hanna-Barbera, and I was on staff at Disney in '88 when she broke in, and ended up having offices next to each other and
That's how
getting married and having children. So the Disney magic kind of happened. But it was the Disney afternoon time was when we were working there. And she did 14 Rescue Rangers. She did more than anybody.
Chippendale Rescue Rangers.
I only did 4.
Love that.
Oh man,
I was
That is
the
awesome.
productive one here.
We got to work on all those shows. Darkwing Duck, Goof Troop,
Yes.
Woody the
Darkwing
Pooh.
Duck.
Tailspin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a tremendous time.
Yeah.
But I think most of us were under 3-year contracts.
Yeah.
So when that wrapped, we were all put out into the freelance universe.
Yeah, Disney didn't realize they don't need to have 100 artists and writers on staff. They can let everybody go off freelance, and it's cheaper. So we all went off freelance. And the first major job I got freelance was doing a year of Beetlejuice as a story editor, showrunner for Fox. There's a guy I had worked with earlier in the '80s named Sidney Iwander who was there.
Yeah,
he was Margaret Lesh. Margaret Lesh was just made president, and
Fox Kids was brand new.
They're
Fox
brand new. They
new.
ran like 8 hours a day. They did half days, and Sidney was the hands-on guy for all the kids shows. And as I say, luckily I met him and worked with him before, so he gave me a shot on Beetlejuice. Well, then there were a couple other small gigs, and in like early '92, he calls and says, can you come by? Looks like we may have another show for you. And at the time, he pretended it was something else. There's all this mysterious stuff about, Marvel was being hidden about it.
Oh, he didn't know it was Marvel.
By the time it was Marvel, it's just, can you do a season of Killer Tomatoes for us? It's, oh, sure, I'll supervise that.
And when he says that means he gets all the episodes as the story editor.
Yeah, I'm kind of the contractor, the super. I get wonderful writers to do the hard work, and I edit it and polish it up. Anyway, so I said, okay, I'll do that. And then on a Sunday night in February, he calls up and said, you know what? It's not Killer Tomatoes. That was just a cover. Tomorrow morning, we're meeting with all the people from Marvel who just come out from Marvel in New York, because you're going to be showrunner on the X-Men. And there's this pause because it's like 6 o'clock on a Sunday night. I said, that's a Marvel book, right? Because I hadn't read one. I'd read some Spider-Man and other comics when I was growing up, but X-Men was not one I was familiar with. And he said, yeah, just when you sit through the meeting for 3 or 4 hours with Stan Lee and Haim Saban and all these people, just smile and nod and tell, and don't say anything, and we'll get through this. But yeah, there's no internet. I can't go to a library. I can't go to a comic book store because it's Sunday night. And so we get through that, and I meet the people on the art side who are wonderful.
You met Will
Mineo, who was like the head guy that kind of set the tone for the whole show on the art side, and Larry. Those are the two main guys.
And they knew the books inside and out.
The people on the art side grew up with the books, and so there was no problem there. But we pulled them aside and said, look, I and my number one writer, Mark Edens, who's a friend from Tennessee, we love writing heroic action stories. We don't know these characters. Send us all of this stuff you had. Larry Xerox, a Marvel Universe book, 400-page one with all the characters in it.
That's no joke. Xeroxing and everything. Yeah, that's crazy.
And we went out and bought like X-Men board games and X-Men card collection, trading cards, and so learned the characters in a couple days the best we could. And
at our dining room table, there was no studio space for anybody.
Yeah, and then but they wanted the arc of 13 stories and a pilot script in 2 to 2.5 weeks. So it was one of these throw you in the deep end and just quick, learn everything and get going, because you're already 2 months behind. That's a pretty typical thing in TV out here. You're already 2 months behind.
But also want to point out, you were hired for 13.
Yeah.
X-Men was considered a sort of speculative one-season series because the people above Margaret Lesh did not have confidence that it would hit.
Marvel there were no Marvel movies, and there were the Marvel shows that Hollywood had tried to do were kind of young and dopey, and there had never been a fan satisfying Marvel show of any kind. So Hollywood just thought, that's for a bunch of nerds in their basements. this is not going to be a successful TV show.
And Margaret had been at Marvel trying to sell an X-Men show for 10 years and couldn't get it sold. When she became president of Fox
during the 80s, she pitched
we're making the show.
She pitched it for 10 years during the 80s, and no one would bite. And finally, she says, "I'm on the network now. We're doing the X-Men," and we all got hired, and we worked for 6-7 months, the writers and artists, and then in late summer, we were all let go because they just thought, okay, we'll have the first 13. It'll start playing in January, and
because of production delays.
Yeah, and it'll run, and okay, go on to your next show. And of course, in January, it was this immense hit, like a week out. And suddenly they're calling us all back. And most of us could come back, but some of the guys couldn't. Some of the people,
But again, credit to Margaret Lesh, because the folks above her said, I don't like this idea. But okay, are you willing to put your job on the line? Are you willing to take the hit? In case X-Men doesn't work, which I know it's not going to, are you willing to step down? And she said, yeah, I'll put my job on the line. I'll risk it. So it was that kind of confidence from someone at that level.
And there was a lot of questioning. Like we're writing scripts in February, March, April, and they're drawing 300-page storyboards as fast as they can. And people are seeing these things. These are kind of adult, weird, intense, dramatic stories. I can't sell, the advertisers, I can't sell cereal with this, or, the local affiliate TV station saying, kids aren't going to turn into this. They're just going to, what is, and so there was pushback during the 7 months we were waiting to get, to write the stories and get the animation back and see if the show made sense and see if it worked, because you never know. And Margaret just stood her ground and said, I believe in the creative people that I've hired. Shut up, let us do our work. And I'd say there were half a dozen times we easily could have been replaced or been told to make the show different, dumb it down, or make it goofier, or give them funny sidekicks, or whatever it was that people think will improve a TV show out here.
And if you go and watch the first 13 as a whole season, the final 3 episodes, the 2 Days of Future Past, and then the Final Decision, if you watch those without the tag ending, it is a complete telling of a story. It is. It could have been a single season. We didn't want it to be, but we assumed it was going to be.
And we added when they were just supposed to say, okay, Gene, are you going to marry me? And it's the end of the show, and it was just going to go out on this kind of high note. And then for whatever reason, when we're starting the second season, we went back and said, wait a minute, we're going to put Mr. Sinister in here to do something. So they went back retroactively and added a little glimmer at the end of Mr. Sinister at the end of episode 13 of the first season to give you a sense, something's coming next season. But when we finished writing and they finished drawing, that wasn't in there. That wasn't in there yet.
Right.
There was,
It was like an end credit scene. You finished the movie and then you did a little.
You guys invented the end credit scene for Marvel. Look at that.
So one of our questions we ask all of our creators that come on the show is, what is your geek origin story? And I feel like we kind of just got it, but I'm still going to ask, because the answer we get the most on this show is the X-Men animated series.
Oh, it's so cool.
And every time I'm like, that is a very common answer we get. So I can't imagine how many comic book creators you guys have spawned by creating this show and writing for this show. So was your geek origin story really at that table setting out all these comics?
Well,
so my geek origin story is the original Star Trek.
Yeah.
The original Star Trek and Monty Python. And
and Monty Python, I love it.
As we were talking about, we're old enough. I remember I was 11 and a half years old, and I was in my friend's basement. I remember what I was wearing, and there's this first episode of the original Star Trek.
He's that old.
Yeah. And they said, what is this? It was a salt monster. And that hooked me. And I watched reruns after reruns after reruns of that with my dad. And I was more, when I was a kid, less comic books, more Mad Magazine.
Mad Magazine, big one.
Was a big geek influence. So, but yeah, and so when we met out here, when we're in our 20s,
30s when we met.
Yeah, 30s, and we said, "Oh, you think you know Star Trek?" So there was a certain amount of what about? And so there was a certain amount of testing going on there about what we remembered from every episode. So we
kind of bonded over that.
The original series. That's what started the geek train flowing.
Micah, I see you've got both books there. Is this the time
Yeah.
to bring up our Star Trek connection that we didn't know about until the show was
Yes,
decades
absolutely.
old?
Bring it up. of
So
course.
it is
Yeah.
so cool. So you guys know, one of our favorite characters to write for was Apocalypse. And
Oh,
the
man.
actor's- The actor's
Oh.
name is John Colicos. He had this
Okay.
incredible voice,
And I'm holding up
like nobody else's.
Apocalypse or a Apocalypse
Yeah.
and Apocalypse.
And
And then-
we didn't discover till long after the show was done
Four.
that the person that was reading our Apocalypse lines was the very first Klingon.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, wow.
Right.
It's from the end of the first season, like episode 30 or something. And
Yeah.
this guy comes in and challenges Kirk. And
Yep.
so, yeah,
Yep.
that guy was reading 15 episodes that had our dialogue in it. And that
I had
just
no idea.
knocked us over.
Yeah. When we
I was-
found out, and sadly he had passed
He
years
passed
before,
by then, but
it's
when
like
we found out.
to have that connection just means the world to me because that's what got
Oh,
me
yeah.
into this kind of universe. So
Yeah.
That's amazing. I want to say, Apocalypse was this character when he came out. I had seen him in the comic books and stuff, but to like hear his voice when I saw him in the cartoon, and then I would go back and read the comic books, and that I was using the voice from the animated series as I read, because it was just crazy. Just came out, especially the 4-part Beyond Good and Evil. And I think it was in season 3 or 4. It's literally my favorite 4 episodes in the entire series. It was just out of this world. But that's
well, a little callback
Yeah.
on those 4 episodes.
We got a little hint on that. That was supposed to be the end of the whole series.
The
That was
whole
spo-
65
that was
run,
supposed
that
to be
was it.
episodes 62 through 65, and that because Sydney Youngwater at Fox pulled us aside and said, well, we're finishing up 65, and this is what we have the budget for, which was standard back then, and let's go out with a big bang. Let's go out with as big a bang as you can imagine, and bring as many people in as you can. And we had plotted it out. It's 40 pages of script, so it's a 160-page script.
We still have it in a file cabinet somewhere.
Oh, wow.
Where a bunch of guest character mutants came in, like Psylocke and Bishop and Shard, Bishop's sister, and
yeah.
Archangel.
Mhm.
Those people, by the end of the story, were supposed to come and become X-Men, and 5 of our X-Men were going to leave the team.
Oh, wow.
And we had set it all up that way. And then just when we finished writing the story, we get a call saying, no, we're going to do 11 more. We're going to do more episodes.
But not a full 13, but we're going to do some.
But so you can't let 5 people leave and 4 new people. So all that set up to try to, okay, this is why Archangel's going to be here. And this is why Bishop and Shard are going to be. All that was set up. We kind of had to shift it over and let them leave again. But that was the original plan when we were writing it, was to shift teams like that as a way to say goodbye.
Huh.
Wow.
Matt,
No,
you
go ahead.
Mine's blown.
Yeah. Well, no. So was it at that point, did you guys get to include any characters that you had been waiting to include at that point, since you found out you got a little bit more? Were there any characters that you get a chance to play with?
For some of the writers there were, and some of the later.
Well, the big one, I think, Captain America.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a big
Mhm.
one. Okay, for, the elephant in the room, season 5, those last 11 episodes, the budget was slashed.
Cut in half.
People were let go.
Margaret,
we know, we get it. We were there.
Margaret was eased out from Fox, and so we didn't have this person defending our budget and everything. So those last 11 episodes, people can tell the difference. The animation's not quite right.
But I will still stand behind.
But there's some cool stories.
Wonderful stories in there, including the one Old Soldiers.
Yeah, and the cool thing about that is that came to being because Len Wein, who created in the comic books Wolverine and Storm and Colossus and Nightcrawler, and half the best characters that we used in our series. He's a wonderful guy who had passed recently.
He had been in New York writing comic books, and then you found out.
I found out he'd moved to Los Angeles and he might be available to write.
Again, no internet, no Google. You didn't even know he was here.
I didn't know he was here in the
LA.
first season. I didn't know to call him, so I called him meekly, saying, after we've done a season, saying, we've done a whole season of X-Men, and I just found out you live here. Would you like to write for us? They said, cool. So he ended up doing 4 episodes, and we called him when we got the order for the last few and said, do you want to do any more? He said, not really. He said, the one thing that would bring me back is if we could get Marvel legal department to let us use Captain America because I've got a cool story idea with Wolverine and Captain America. And we said, okay, well, we'll try. And he called. And
other people called. No, you can't use Captain America. No.
But it took a few weeks. Len called, got through to him.
calls.
And it was, but that was a weird thing back then. They'd given the rights to a bunch of different people. They were so desperate. They were going through bankruptcy that they'd given a lot of the rights away. So there were a lot of characters we couldn't use. And this is one we had to get like a license to use for one episode. And they said yes.
Pardon me.
And so that way Len came back and wrote the episode, which was, we thought was
a beautiful episode.
Very sweet, very effective episode.
Oh yeah, it's a great episode.
A good one,
it was really good.
Yeah.
And so like kind of talking about also on that note, X-Men, like you guys right off the bat kind of hit on a lot of like, for a kids show, there's a lot of adult kind of overtones and themes to this. Was that always kind of intended, or did it just natural story progression to want to intertwine, despite being a kid's cartoon, like these adult themes that really play out throughout the X-Men?
Well, I think there are 2 or 3 things that all came together to make it a perfect storm for us and for the writer, for the artists involved. We'd all been involved in the business, for the TV animation business, for anywhere from 5 to 10 years, and we'd been frustrated by the fact that we were often forced to dumb down our storytelling and simplify, and there's so many rules about what you can and can't let children see and let them hear or think about or whatever. And so when we got to this, we're looking at the books, and the books in the early 90s are ferociously intense, very adult books. And we're looking at Margaret Lesh and the people that hire us and said, do you want us to be faithful to the books, or do you want us to do the usual Hollywood thing of dumbing everything way down? And we said, no, man, push the envelope. We want this to be as intense as you can make it. And so we and, the writers and the artists all were like out jumping for joy, riding in the streets, thrilled at the opportunity. Because it's not like the folks writing, simplified, dumbed down kids shows think that way. It's that they're told by the executives or by
fit it in this box,
advertiser, whatever. No, you're being too challenging for our audience. We're trying to sell toys to 3 to 8-year-olds, and you've got Wolverine and Jean and in a love triangle. They're not going to get that. Whatever it is, the intensity of the violence, or say we're going to get hundreds of thousands of letters from horrified parents that this is, interestingly, as the series went along, we didn't get very many, Fox didn't get many angry letters from parents. As intense as the show was, the great joke is Beetlejuice got a lot more angry letters, because from fundamentalists who were upset that the hero of the show was a demon that lived in the netherworld, and that was not the way to have a comedy show for children. And
then now look at today's shows.
No, right. So yeah, we wrote, I think this is always the best writing. We wrote for ourselves as adults, stories that grabbed us emotionally. And I think one of the reasons there's so much drama and interpersonal drama in the show is, since we couldn't show, like in an R-rated movie, we couldn't show actual, blood and sex, and we had to tone all the actual visuals down. We shifted the drama and the intensity to the interpersonal relationships. That way we could end a scene with people, heartbroken or anxious or dying to help each other, and so there would be all the intensity. And where we couldn't, if it were an X-Men movie, they could show armies coming in slaughtering other armies. So we couldn't do that. We shifted it to the characters, and that seemed to ended up being a good thing for us.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the first ever X-Men comic book, obviously the only female is Jean Grey, and she's it's in the 60s. She's very much so treated, oh, the housekeeper's gone. I'd love to make dinner for you guys.
Yeah.
You guys did not do that. Right out the gate, you have more than one woman. You even tweeted today that there was the first show that had a female president, which is because I didn't actually watch X-Men as a child. So I watched it as an adult. I didn't even get into comic books until I was in my 20s. So I'm like still catching up on all these things. So that was really kind of cool to see. And the women and the men in the show, outside of the bad guys, they treat each other equal. And like you just said, you build on the personalities. So was that intentional so that you could also, target that young girl audience and do the female power thing? Or did it just come natural because that's just how you wanted to create these characters?
I think by the
started
time,
natural.
By the time you were tapped in 1992 to do the animated series, the books had gone through such a progression. There'd been 30 years of X-Men books up until that point. And there'd been, was it in the 80s?
There'd been 29 different X-Men characters.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were called upon to pick the characters, it was interesting. It wasn't a quota thing, and we weren't trying to be progressive or anything. It's just we sat down with all the partners like Marvel and Fox, and from the writer's standpoint, we said, who are the 7 or 8 characters that are most different from each other? Because we don't want like 6 G.I. Joes and a G.I. Jane. We don't want 6 Smurfs and a Smurfette. And which is very much, you're right, 1963, the first X-Men year was 6 Smurfs and a Smurfette. There was not at all. So we said, okay, let's find, whose powers are different, whose powers work best in animation. And after all those elements came in, we happened to end up with 4 men and 4 women and an old bald guy with bad legs in a wheelchair. And it wasn't a conscious decision. That's just how it ended up. We talked about it. It could have been like Cable and Colossus and Warpath and Wolverine, and we could have 6 guys growling at each other. And that's just, we couldn't have told our stories with those people. Mm-hmm. And it was absolutely self-interest that we picked as diverse a team as we could imagine for in all those ways. And by dumb luck, it was half guys and half girls, and the girls were more powerful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love that the girls are the ones that can fly because they.
Thank you.
Yeah. Guys, yeah.
And each of them, things are flying and people are dropping rocks on each other, but superhero power wise, they are each a little just different enough from each other that they fight brilliantly as a team, but each one of them brings a specific strength to it. And that was something you kind of picked up on when you were picking up the players.
Yeah. In fact, the thing that makes people smile is that my inspiration for pushing to have the characters so different from each other is Winnie the Pooh. That's my favorite thing to write for Disney, because you read a line on a script. If it's a Tigger line, if it's a Piglet line, if it's a Pooh line, they're completely, it has to be. No one but Tigger would say that. No one but Piglet would say that. And we wanted to have our dialogue so distinct that if it's a line the Cyclops says, there's no way in the world Wolverine would have said that. Mm-hmm. And so we fought for that at the beginning. Marvel's cool with it as long as we kept on characters that they liked. There were 2 or 3 new people. We wanted a young character, so Jubilee. They picked her over Kitty Pryde as the one that they were pushing in '92. So that's cool. And Gambit was really brand new to them. Gambit and Cable were. So they said, can we integrate these people? I said, yeah, Gambit, because he's so different. And we'll have Cable be a guest because we didn't really feel there was room for him. But a couple of the characters like Beast, this is hard to believe. He wasn't, in the first month, wasn't set to be one of the main characters. He was going to be a guest. And that's why he was in jail. We thought, okay, we'd get it. We'd put him in jail in the first story, and we'd find him again 8 or 9 stories later. And I'm
going to put this picture up. The Neil Adams artwork that was the early promo shot.
That's the first promo shot. Look who's not in there.
He's not in it.
Neither is Gambit, neither is Jean Grey, because there was a question of who.
They needed something real fast at the beginning before we locked down the team, but Beast is so different and so special, kind of like Mr. Spock in Star Trek, that as we were writing the stories, he kept asserting himself like, well, we need a scene here, and Beast is the only one that we could go to get the point across. We want to get the point across. And by the time the smoke cleared after 13 episodes, he was in 9 or 10 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And he
even in jail.
Yeah, even from jail. We kept on going back to the jail because we needed to spend time with him. And that's weird. That happens in real life in TV shows where someone might be a guest on the 2nd or 3rd episode and they hadn't planned him being a regular, but chemistry is so great that he stays on. And that happened with Beast and with Jean, because Jean was said, use her or don't use her as you need to. And she seemed to have such an understanding of everybody. She seemed to be able to relate to everybody in a way nobody else could. We kept on having to come back to her because like she was some sort of emotional center for the team.
Yeah. And that's funny. Shout out to one of our folks, DT, in our Discord. That was his big question was, why did they have my boy Beast in the jail the whole time? So it's funny that he was a guest. He wasn't supposed to be there. And kind of speaking of these characters that you introduced, such as Jubilee, you actually start the entire series focused on her with Night of the Sentinels. What was that planning going into that? How did you guys decide to settle on, you know what, we're going to make her the focal point to kick off this series?
I think we were given a gift from Margaret Lesh. She was so smart. She said, look, the X-Men is a big comic book, but that means, a couple million people read it. And we need more like 12 million people
to watch
the show. And so most of our audience, 80-90% of our audience, since the X-Men weren't common knowledge, then they weren't necessarily part of the popular culture.
They weren't.
They won't know who the X-Men are. They won't know who mutants are. They won't know what this whole world is. So you're going to have to be very careful to introduce how all these people are related to each other. Mm-hmm. Anytime writing a pilot script and setting up a new world for a TV audience, you got to take some time and set things up. So it was absolutely, Will Mineo had a story where, said there was early in the books where a young person comes in and discovers the X-Men for the first time. So the audience is able to learn all this stuff right along with Jubilee because it's so weird and different to her. And everybody has to explain themselves to her naturally. Nothing more painful than exposition. Hi, we work together, but I'm going to tell you all about us as if we've never, as if we didn't know each other. So it made sense that everything that Jubilee discovered in the first story, the audience discovered along with her. And by the end of episode 2, you'd hoped you'd met all the characters and you got what was going on in this world, and that Jubilee had as well, so that she'd learned it along with you. And she was absolutely used for that. And I think we kind of neglected her a little in maybe episode season 3 and 4, where we were going off into space and we were doing stuff with the more adult characters. We used her a lot in the first season and paid her off at the end of the first season.
But that was also one of the challenges with animation. This was for a Saturday morning animated kids program. She was still she was a minor and could not be allowed to be. She would want to be, but she could not be allowed to be in certain situations.
Certain amount of danger.
Right. There were rules.
Anything romantic. There's a great there's a moment Longshot, the guy from the Mojo universe, who's this gorgeous 20-ish guy, and she's all kind of blushy and flirty and she's maybe 14 or 15 by then. And in the storyboard, just before the end of the episode, before he goes back to the Mojo verse, he leans over and gives her a kiss. And which was very
sweet and chaste.
Yeah, and the storyboard, he kisses her on the lips. Fox made us make it a forehead kiss. But that's the level of nervousness and rule making that we so that's Jubilee's first kiss was this gorgeous guy giving her a kiss on the forehead instead of
Well, see, watching it as a grown-up, and I have kids of my own who are that age and older, and so that was my thought was, oh, she's just at home because she's a minor. I actually appreciated that because you see, like, how many times has Batman put Robin into danger?
Right.
Even Peter Parker. Like, I actually enjoyed in the movie when they were telling Aunt May, like, we might get you for child endangerment. I'm like, they're not wrong. They have a point.
It makes a lot of sense.
So I just kind of was that's exactly where I went in my head, but I'm watching it through the eyes of a parent. So obviously I mentioned at the beginning, Logan is clearly my favorite character. However, a lot of times Wolverine, because he's so popular, always seems to kind of be put on a pedestal, rightfully so. However, you guys did not do that. You wrote all the characters on an even scale. So was there a formula to this? I know you've even talked about it a little bit, but did the executives or anyone on staff want there to be more focus on Wolverine or any specific characters, or were you just like, do what you need to do in your toy box as far as that?
We were pretty open at the time. Marvel was, as I say, small and struggling, and so we weren't told what to write from them. And Fox was happy. They had 12 shows to get out, and so they were happy to pretty much let us write what we wanted to. But what happened with us trying to balance it is we're in trying to make the show as good as we could. We tried to spread.
I'm going to hold this up to the camera if you can see this. This is a chart Eric made for himself
for the first season
try and keep track of which characters had been used, which characters had not been used in a while. Just trying to keep the balance.
Yeah, because you lose focus. It's okay. Wolverine. We actually purposefully, I think, consciously pulled back on Wolverine because the writers wanted to write him so much. He's so colorful. It's like having Clint Eastwood there as the lead, and why would you? But to make, we thought we had 13 stories and we thought we had 26 half hours to tell. To tell the best ones we could, we didn't want to repeat ourselves. So we wanted to say, okay, what's the best Storm story we could tell? What's the best Rogue story we could tell? What's, et cetera, et cetera. And then when we introduced the guest ones, let's do an Iceman episode. Let's do a Nightcrawler episode. We tried to really give everybody as intense an episode as it could. And there's so many of them, it kind of naturally spread the storytelling around. And we didn't want it to become Wolverine and the X-Men. We wanted it to be this larger family so that everybody, you're right, everybody felt equal. Everybody had each other's backs. It was, everybody was just as concerned about the other person. And so, yeah, that was quite conscious, trying to spread the storytelling wealth among the group.
I would say mission accomplished.
Yeah, I would absolutely say so. And now kind of talking about that, again, introducing certain characters, you introduced another character that I think I've seen a lot of people show love for lately, and that's Morph. What went into the decision behind, killing Morph and creating this character?
Well, a lot went into that.
Well, here we get to do a shout out to another lady. See, there's another reason we have so many good female-centered stories, is that two of our big bosses were women. Besides Margaret, our censor, our broadcast standards executive, was a woman named Avery Coburn. And if she told us to do X-Men babies, where they just play at a playpen for 76 episodes, that's what we would have had to do.
Her word is law.
She had the final say. Mm-hmm. Luckily, she liked the comic books and she liked more adult storytelling. And so she let us have a lot more leeway than any show before this. And so the thing with Morph was Mark Edens and I, who was, again, my head writer, he probably had a hand in 30 of the episodes, even if he didn't take credit.
At our dining room table.
The Phoenix story, the Beyond Good and Evil, et cetera, et cetera.
The first 13.
Yeah, yeah. He did the pilot. He did the wrap up of the first season. Anyway, Mark and I, the first thing we said when we sat down is, we love his heroic storytelling to show that there's consequences for the X-Men, that this is a true heroic struggle. We need to show a heroic sacrifice, and to do that, we need to kill somebody. And so Julia just rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, you're never going to get that past Avery." So that was like a 2-week thing back and forth with Avery, saying, "Look, we're not doing this to be gratuitous." And she started letting say, "Okay, maybe if you do it off screen, maybe if you do this, maybe," and it was back and forth. And so she finally said, "Yes, it's all about the grief. It's all about the family coming together after the loss. It's not about the Sentinels slaughtering this guy."
And it shows consequences. There are consequences in this universe.
To being an X-Men.
Yeah.
And for the last 10 years, we've been going to cons, and everybody brings up, "My God, I was watching this and first story, and you killed Morph."
They're halfway through their Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and they're like, "What?"
Yeah. So, but the twist to it, of course, no good deed ever goes unpunished. We finished the season. It was all wonderful. It was this big hit. And
we were all let go, by the way.
And again, and I said we were all let go because they don't keep you on staff during the 4 months of downtime. And we're waiting to see if the show's going to be successful, and it is. And they're hiring us back. And Sydney, Margaret's right-hand man, who is our hand-on boss, called and said, "Guys, I'm sorry, but we just had a focus group."
2 words you never want to hear. Focus group.
A room full of 9-year-olds, and we asked them on this hot new show.
Showed them the episodes.
Who's your favorite? Who's your favorite character? And Morph won by a landslide.
Oh my god!
Because he's funny, and because all the rest of the characters love him. And that's the whole point. We made him as lovable as we could, so when he's killed, it would have an emotional impact. Well, you made too lovable, and so they said, you killed him off screen. Is there any way you can bring him back, like in a soap opera or in comic books? So okay, and we were pounding our heads. We'd worked for a month to be able to kill him, and now we couldn't stay dead.
For the record, he was supposed to stay dead.
He was supposed to stay dead.
But I think you guys made a really smart decision in bringing him back the way you then did, that he came back lovable, deeply tortured and troubled by what had happened to him and what he thought the X-Men had done in abandoning him. And that made for some really tense storytelling.
Oh, yeah. I mean, first of all, it's comics. Nobody ever stays dead. That's the beauty of being back, right?
But that was the first.
The way you did, yeah, it was extremely well done, and it adds even more depth and layers to this character that people already loved. And then you get to kind of do more with that character at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started watching and I'm like, wait, I don't know who this guy is. I'm like, oh,
so
there goes that guy.
Yeah.
There is a character in working with Larry Houston who knows the books backwards and forwards. Like, was there a character who would have made this kind of sacrifice that you could then pick?
So yeah, he gave us a list of 4 or 5. When we first wrote the pilot, Mark and I together, Thunderbird was the guy that was going to be. That's why his brother's in this title sequence, because they designed him when they're running at each other. Warpath is in there. We never see Warpath in the series, but they designed Thunderbird to be in the first story and get killed, because in the books he sacrifices himself for the X-Men. So okay, we'll use him. And we finished the pilot script, and then somebody looked at it and said, "Wait a minute. He's our only Native American character, and you kill him. You kill him in the first story. This is a little weird politically." So they said, they said, Larry, because since you're just introducing this character to kill him, is there another character in the history of the books that sacrifices himself for the good of the X-Men? And there were 2 or 3, and one of them was Morph.
One of them was Changeling.
I'm sorry. One of them was named Changeling. And so we got the picture of him and we wrote him in the script as Changeling.
First script.
And then the lawyers called up and said, "Wait a minute, DC has a Changeling character. You can't use the name." I said, "Well, but Marvel's was written first. Doesn't matter."
Well, Changeling is also just like something totally different in mythology as well.
Yeah. So okay, so fine. We took the design of Changeling, we took the powers of Changeling, we took the fact that Changeling sacrificed himself to save the X-Men, and I renamed him Morph. And that's how Morph began.
Huh.
Well, that's a more unique name too. That's more, stand out.
It's more fun. Yeah. It's more accurate. You're right.
Oh, without a doubt. And now a lot of these episodes too are like 2-parter episodes. Was that because you guys found it hard to condense it down into 20 minutes and you're like, man, we got to do something, just like chop it here. We'll make a 2-parter and go with that.
Yeah, we're long-winded. There's the terrible story of Mark and I kept writing more and more, sticking more and more stuff into the pilot script. And Will Mineo came by about a month later after he and his best artists and Larry had drawn it all. And said, "Here is the 1,000 pages. Here's the 900 pages of storyboard that it takes to draw what you wrote." And he took a third of it and dropped to the side. Here's how much we have time and money to animate. So we tended to like longer stories and just you're able to breathe more.
And Will Mineo was also keenly aware that comic books themselves tell things over a period of multiple books. So using that sensibility, it worked for this kind of storytelling to do it that way. However,
he pushed for that for the first season to have things as connected as we could. And Margaret said, "Okay, we'll take that risk." It's a problem because animation takes 4 or 5 months. You don't know when you get it back, if one of the episodes is going to come back. So if episode 3 is awful, we can't show episode 4 or 5 until we get episode 3 fixed. And that absolutely happened. And that is one of the main reasons the show premiered in January rather than the previous September. Just teething problems in the production. We had, as somebody said, Marvel-sized stories and Saban-sized budgets and schedules, and so they were just working overtime and killing themselves overseas to get this stuff done, and it wasn't quite right, and there was too much of it, and we kind of found a balance by the end of the first season and got it right. But that first season, it just was, stuff was falling apart everywhere, and Margaret was holding her head and saying, "This is why you don't do 13 connected stories. That's why 99% of animated shows are contain single episodes, so that if a couple come back wrong, you can just substitute, and one doesn't rely. You can put Law and Order episodes almost in any order you want to. It doesn't matter."
But there was also a lot of pushback. Kids aren't going to remember from one week to the next what the previous week's stuff was.
We got crap about
confusion.
Are you kidding? My kids remember if I tell them I'm going to take them somewhere in 6 months. 6 months comes up and they're like, "Hey, we're going to go get ice cream, remember?"
Right. So we had a wonderful editor, another woman on the project, Sharon Janis. And she had worked in prime time, and she had cut some of these last week, previously on Hill Street Blues, and had to cut the opening stuff. And so she said, "Look, we can give you 45 seconds of recap that saves you 45 seconds of animation money,
because we're using old animation.
And this way we can hold the hands of the littler children that maybe don't remember where the previous 3 episodes,
or because there was no DVR."
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So that calm down the people that were so freaked out. Those kids are not going to remember, and we want it's like your kids. We've told, they don't know big words. They'll be freaked out. They'll turn the channel if you challenge them too much. And I remember being a kid and just being fascinated by stuff that older kids understood, and I half understood, and I just wanted to see it more and learn it. So.
And I mean, that's how we got to expose, talk to them like they're grown-ups. Kids appreciate that, and they learn more when you do that.
I do it with my kids for sure.
Yeah. So was there ever a story that you wanted to tell from the comics that you just couldn't fit into 20-minute increment episodes?
There were some other writers on the show who were also big comic book fans, and
they would
had specific stories they were very keen to try and tell.
Yeah.
Didn't always translate, but you got to do the Phoenix Saga. You got to do stuff.
It was a weird thing because from a comic fan standpoint, you would come to the show saying, "I've got 20 or 30 different stories I want to tell on television." And since Mark and I, my main writer, and I didn't know the books at all, we had no agenda. We didn't say, issue 118. Oh my God, I've got to tell that one. So we were just focusing on the characters and saying, what's the coolest thing we do with the characters? And then we'd look back into the reference books, or we'd call people that knew the comics and said, well, we need a certain challenge for Wolverine. Oh, it's got to be Sabretooth because he did this, and this. So when you're telling this personal story about Wolverine leaving the X-Men and trying to find himself and then returning, the thing that you've got to throw in his way is Sabretooth. And here's a couple scenes from a couple cool books you might want to pull from. So we started with the characters and started with the stories. People, the first 26 episodes, the only thing that was a direct adaptation was Days of Future Past.
And that got a lot.
The other 24 were us thinking, what's cool stories, and pulling bits and pieces. And every chance we could, we used characters from the X-Men world. That was kind of a given. We didn't make up new villains because there's 300 of them,
right?
That we could pick from. Just as a I don't know, respect for the fans, respect for Marvel. We did that on purpose. But
I'm pointing here. There's a photograph here with us with Larry Houston and the great Chris Claremont. We got to meet him. In 2018, 2019.
We started. We've seen him at cons.
He was very gracious to us, and I went up and introduced myself and said, "I don't know if if you're going to hate me or if you're going to make me. But I was one of the writers on.
Used so much of your stuff.
Yeah, we had our previous X-Men hats, and I said I worked on Days of Future Past. Gave him the hat and he goes, well, I am previously on X-Men, so he was wearing our hat then.
So cool.
But again, Days of Future Past is one of the crown jewels of the X-Men books. But in terms of translating it into TV show, well, you can't use Kitty Pryde. Oh, okay. You know, and you're not sending Wolverine back. Oh, okay.
So
what am I doing?
Yeah.
So the basic story's there, but we adjusted it to fit our cast. And I think the one thing that the one just creative choice that we made, because we, like in the Phoenix Saga, we tried in both of them, we tried to keep every detail of that that we could, just in streamlining those two. But in Days of Future Past, I think the one change we made was, I think like the spirit of Kitty goes from, as opposed to time travel, physical time travel. In the books, there's like this spirit of somebody. We just thought, you know, this could be confusing to the kids. So let's actually let's introduce Forge and have a time travel machine in the future. And that's how.
And introduce Bishop.
Yeah. And introduce Bishop. So, but yeah, it was in that way. Yeah. There wasn't so much of an agenda. There wasn't stuff that we were dying to tell. In fact, kind of the reverse happens when you're the supervisor, you know, the showrunner, whatever you want to call the guy that's supervising the scripts. We're given a very short time to come up with 13 really good stories for the year out of hundreds that we could tell. And the writers are pitching and you're coming up with stuff and you realize, oh my God, this one looked okay, but it's just like one we did the season before. So finding the 13 that everybody kind of agrees on are going to be kind of cool.
Yeah.
That is the biggest anxiety, because you can go a month and not come up with a good story. It's hard. That's the hardest part. For me anyway, it's by far the hardest part. Once we come up with a cool story idea, people like my wife, we have absolute faith there's a craft level there of the better writers in town where you could just say, okay, here's a story where, Beast and a blind girl are fall in love and they can't stay together. Quick, come up with a cool 40 pages.
And you got 3 weeks. Okay.
Yeah, you got to. Okay, that part of it, to my mind, is the easier craft part.
I'm sorry, we have dogs, and that's what's going on.
Yeah, I do too. You're totally good.
Yeah, the hard part is coming up with, if there's going to be a love story like that, which again ripped off from Charlie Chaplin from City Lights, but if there's going to be a story like that, who should it be with? And well, okay, it should be with Beast because he's the most self-conscious about how he looks. If there's a blind girl that can't see him, who's going to be the most anxious? Well, she's going to get her sight and she's going to see what I really look like. And that was, so it was all character thought out as far as but I say, coming up those story kernels was the bane of my existence. And if somebody just had, that's why the Phoenix Saga was great. We visited Marvel after 2 seasons.
You got to go to New York.
Yeah, and talk to what is there anything from the books that you really want us, now that we've set our world up, that you want us to try to adapt? They said, how about these two? Great, that's 9 episodes. I've almost got a whole season done right there. I don't have to worry about this for 6 months. So that was the tough part for me.
Oh yeah.
Now, in the last few years, we've had 2 moments in the MCU where we heard the X-Men music. So based on your reaction, I'm going to guess that was exciting moments for you. So how did you react?
Yeah. No one told us.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
We weren't warned.
We weren't
So
warned.
when you found out, were you in the theater or did you hear before you saw? Oh, wow.
Well, no, I take it back. Didn't they tease it in the trailer? There was something on YouTube, I think, before.
I think they did, yeah.
Where they teased it or just showed the wheelchair and the green sleeve of the suit, and in the Multiverse of Madness, and going, holy crap, that's got to be who I think it's going to be. And then in the theater hearing. And it's our version. It's our guy. It's our version of Xavier. So yeah, that was cool. We got a sense then that Marvel, in all their 20-year plan wisdom, was now thinking about how do we reintroduce the X-Men. We've had 10, 15 years of them in a certain way, and we're going to have to, reintroduce them and start them fresh.
and it's just like, my God, this looks like they're going back to our show.
That was thrilling.
And
And then in Ms. Marvel, and we need to give a shout out to a fellow named Ron Wasserman, who was the actual composer of the songs. For a lot of legal reasons, different names get put on different things, but he's the one who wrote the theme to X-Men the Animated Series. He was under contract, so that's how that.
So one of his bosses took credit on the credits.
But Ron Wasserman wrote X-Men the Animated Series theme song, made it a banger, and he also wrote the Power Rangers theme song, along with many other songs.
And never got a penny of royalties on either one because he was working on staff. He was working on staff, so the company owned both of them.
Oh my! Those are like the two songs of my entire childhood existence, even now. And oh my! And he did both of them.
Yep.
That's such a shame. That is such a shame. And oh man, hopefully
now we can tip a hat to him.
Exactly.
Give about it. Yeah.
Give that credit. That's awesome. And do you kind of a couple more questions too? Do you guys have a favorite X-Men? One like character that you just always will hold near and dear to your heart and soul?
We talked about him earlier, but for me as a writer, and as a damaged romantic poet, teen girl geek, it's Beast. It's Beast.
So, were you the one that would pull the quotes that he would say?
That is okay.
I'm responsible
for starting that.
But then the other writers kind of ran with it. And in the opening sequence, in the pilot story, they're about to go into action, and Beast's there, and we thought, oh well, we're used to in other animated shows that there are calls to action. They tend to be kiddie, like Cowabunga or whatever, Avengers Assemble, and you know what? I thought, wouldn't it be goofy? Wouldn't it be just a real contrast to that if our most erudite character makes an obscure poetic reference instead of saying let's kick ass,
right?
And so there was no internet, and I just went by theme. I've got a couple dusty old quote, like Roget's Thesaurus quote books.
So this is the original book. Bartlett's
you say that looks like a legal book.
Bartlett's quotations. Yeah. And so I just looked under
just looked
theme,
stuff up,
and I think I looked under feet, because his feet were. I had the storyboard. His feet were rising above those things, and so under feet there was an obscure reference from an absolutely obscure British poet, and we used it, and it just was cool. Everybody enjoyed it, and so all the writers started finding a Beast moment where he'd say something. And they'd go and dig out something. They try to out obscure each other.
Exactly. That became fun, trying to be the smartest person in the room.
Put it in the last episode too for Xavier to do a look back. So I thought that was really cool to bring it full circle.
Yeah, it made me cry.
It's still we can still get choked up about that. Beautiful episode written by Jim Creed. Yeah. That was his first episode writing for X-Men.
Ever.
Was writing the last episode for X-Men. Just putting that out there. And he's gone on to have a huge career with Batman. So, but that the last episode, graduation day.
So we've kept you here quite a while, and I could keep you here all night, especially because if I switch my laptop around, all you're going to see are Winnie the Pooh Beanie Babies. So
yes.
So tell us about your books that you were showing up. I know Mike has already been praising the books, so I know you have the Previously On, and what's the other ones about the animation. So tell us a little bit about those, where people can pick them up and where people can find you.
Yeah. So Julia has our you can contact us if you want a signed copy.
Yes,
they're both available on Amazon.
Yes.
But if you want a signed copy, personally signed copy, we always have a few cases of them in our office.
We're happy to cut you deals.
We'll sign them and ship them to you. Just contact us through our email, which is XMENTAS 92 at gmail.com. And the first one came out in 7. This kind of started us on the con circuit.
Yeah.
It started in 2015. Interviewed 36 folks on the show, cast, artists, writers, executives.
I started poking him because people weren't, the rights weren't in one place, and so people were kind of like, "Oh, X-Men, we called Marvel about it. Said, "Now we're not interested in the book. We're not interested in a Blu-ray edition of the DVDs or anything." Yeah, we've been trying
because the rights are split between 3 people, and it's not going anywhere. So anyway, we did this book by ourselves because Marvel wasn't interested, and at the time, and
so it's like an oral history of the making.
And found a publisher in California that wanted to do it and got it, and that went around. And then about 2 years later, we got a call from a big shot at Marvel. We thought, oh, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And he said, oh no, he said, we've read your book, we loved your book because it's got really dense detail about how, like, all about the behind the scenes stuff about how we held the show together, and it's just the various ups and downs of making a TV show.
We'd hung on to the paper scripts.
We had all the scripts and all the storyboards and all the memos, all the scared memos from each other. You know, what are we going to do about this problem? Yeah. So but they said, look, we've got all the rights together now.
And now we're going to do a coffee table.
You can use the artwork now. Let's have Marvel back you and make a really big coffee table book with all the art in it. So this one's much more about the actual physical process, an artistic process of putting the show together.
And again, if you can see, we have cells, we have storyboards, we have quick sketches, we have all the model sheets for the characters.
Yeah, so they kind of
for every episode
they kind of complement each other. For people that are casual fans, the art one is obviously much more attractive because it has 1,000 beautiful bits of art in it. This one is so much detail about, you know, every month of the production that if you're really into the show, it's got gold that the other one doesn't. But it just depends on which mood you're in. Yeah. And we got them both.
So and we're at XMENTAS on Twitter X, on Instagram, on Facebook, I think, and I try and be as present as possible. You know, just again beating the drum for good old X-Men, and now with what's coming up,
97 coming in what, 2 weeks?
Yes, the 20th. Yes.
When you started writing that first book, we couldn't have imagined.
We couldn't have imagined that it was going to be coming back this big and
this way, that there'd be
the level of excitement.
And and we're really happy to the few things we can say about it, besides incredibly talented people with budgets we could only dream about. So it's beautiful. It's beautiful to look at.
Yeah.
That it is a continuation of our show. It's as if, like, the next Saturday, episode 77 kicked in. It's the same group of people. They tried, 30 years later, there's such advances in animation and in technology, but they try to make it look and feel like the old show, but kind of expand it, kind of halfway between the old show and a beautiful movie.
If you've seen the trailer, and I hope you have,
yes,
it's just very exciting. Yeah. And again, picking up where the original left off, so that's thrilling for us too to have that happen.
When I see Jean's pregnant, I'm like, oh, that's
that was fun. Okay, funny you mentioned that.
that anecdote. You said there was stories we didn't want that they wouldn't let us tell.
Right. So coming into season 2.
After we did the first season, and they said we're going to get married. Oh, wonderful. When we said there's going to be season 2, Mark and I sat down and we thought, well, what do we do? Let's make Jean 7 months pregnant with a big baby bump and out there kicking ass, in her spandex. And then she'll have a double mutant baby, and what cool stuff will come with that. We got notes back from Marvel saying, this is kind of a cool idea, but we have some thoughts about it. This is like too early. Shall we not go there? And
and they hadn't been married yet in the comic book, so
right.
There was some pushback that may or may not happen.
Yeah, we're not sure if we want them to actually get married, we want her to get pregnant. So we wrote that up in the end of in 1993 for the beginning of season 2, and it was put
30
aside.
years later, she's
Will
pregnant.
Video said, no one wants to see.
Yeah. So a lot of the comic book guys say, look, 13-year-old boys are kind of the center of our the heart of our audience, and having their mom with a 7-month baby bump running around kicking ass. Both Mark and
moms aren't cool.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want to put the baby in that kind of danger. I'm just putting that out there as a fellow
maybe
mom.
Superpowers.
We and Mark, my buddy Mark, we just had 4 little babies between the two families, and so we were very baby focused. And it just seemed natural that she should go out there with a baby bump and kick ass. But it got set aside.
And when they did it in Across the Spider-Verse.
They did.
Yeah.
It's a different time.
Look at that.
Different
2
time.
cartoon pregnant
You can
superheroes.
smoke
with
indoors
an
while
ear.
pregnant, but you couldn't have babies out there.
Yeah.
We are seriously so excited, man. Thank you guys, Eric, Julia. You guys have been such a pleasure
Yes,
to talk
thank you
to.
so
I
much.
want to seriously thank you guys so much for taking the chance to talk to us. Thank you for giving me such a rad Saturday morning childhood. Like, you were the highlight of getting to grow up and now getting to chat with you guys. Like, it means a lot to me personally, and so I just want to thank you again. Like, thanks for making my childhood awesome. It means a lot.
Listen, that means so much for us to hear that. Truly, it's so much of the work we do, heads down over a laptop or a piece of paper. And it wasn't until the last 5-10 years that we were able to start going out to cons and things and meeting people and going, wait a minute, there's
a lot of people out there that
there's millions. Yes,
didn't know.
And we don't. And like I say, if you're a performer, if you're a musician, you hear the claps.
Yeah,
and you understand if your music is getting across or not. But until we meet fans, we don't get a sense of, oh, okay, that show worked, that one didn't, but that one really got across. And
again, it was way before the internet, so in a good way for us, we were
left
shielded
alone
from everything.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That also meant we didn't hear the
no fan pressure about how the stories.
There's no like, why is this story happening? Why is this story? And now one of the biggest
troll going out there saying unnecessary stuff. But I mean, the butterfly effect alone, I mean, the popularity of the X-Men movies in the year 2000, like I saw that movie in high school, and that's what spawned my love for then getting into comic books, was seeing that movie.
Margaret Lesh had gone to the live action folks at Fox and said, there is a fan base out here for X-Men. We need to start looking at a live action film. And they didn't listen for
this was the biggest
years.
show we ever had on television. They said, well, it's an animated show.
Yeah, well.
And then they listened and they said, okay, we'll try. And they tried, and there's this, it's a $1 billion franchise. Yeah. And the thing that was gratifying to us also was that the filmmakers looked over and said, okay, we've got 30 years of comic books, but we've got the animated series. And we met the writer of the first two movies. He said the director never picked up a comic book. He just watched your show.
And they picked the same team. I mean, they had the same 30 years plus to pick a different team, but they still chose the same X-Men characters from your team. Yeah, which I also took as pretty nifty.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's animated, man. Cartoons are cool now, especially like it's cool to like cartoons finally.
Animation isn't a category. Animation is a way of telling a story, like black and white cinema. It's just a way of telling a story. It shouldn't be limited to
children.
kids,
right.
to children.
To kids or The Simpsons,
God bless them, but yeah.
That's true. Well, seriously, guys, thank you so much to everybody out there. We hope to run into you guys at some cons and get to just meet you guys. And do you guys have any upcoming appearances?
Yeah, where are you located, you guys?
I'm in Virginia right now.
I'm actually
outside of Richmond.
So when you said
Orlando,
Disney, I was like, I was at Disney yesterday. So.
Wow. So you guys are, thank you for talking to us at this time for you. It must be it's a later night for you guys.
Yeah. We're kind of keeping things open this year because we don't know if there'll be like X-Men 97 stuff to do. But there's a cool thing that happens in the Twin Cities, in Minneapolis, late in September, and it's
the X-Men experience.
The uncanny experience, whatever it is. They take over a 7-story 1908 gentleman's club and turn it into Xavier's mansion, and they sell about 1,000 tickets. Everybody shows up in cosplay, and they did the first one this past September. We were there.
Chris Claremont was there as the president of the school.
Pretending
like,
to be,
God, gave out diplomas. Oh my God.
So they hope to do that every year now. So just look at the uncanny experience
in Minneapolis.
In September. So that's one place we're for sure gonna be.
I'm gonna need the Packers to play the Vikings in September, so that way I have that weekend ticket. So now I have 2 reasons to go there, right? Like,
go Pack, go!
Yes, absolutely, man. See, you guys are amazing. That makes it even more sweeter. This is so much fun.
The right time to say fins up.
Yes, it is.
Okay, Lauren, if you're hitting Disney World over there, you're gonna have to let us know what you see in terms of X-Men 97 and X-Men merchandise. I understand it's starting to come into the show, the stores there.
I actually just did a TikTok about 2 weeks ago. I was at Downtown Disney, or it's now Disney Springs, and I did a video of some of the new stuff. So the Wolvie claws are there, the ones, but you can get them at Target too. They had yeah, they're getting a bunch of new ones. I can't remember what else I put. They had some other random things too, like Beta Ray Bill. They're getting a lot of the merch, and a lot of times in Epcot, there's one of the stores when you get to the World Showcase that does a whole bunch of Marvel stuff, and I'm seeing more of the X-Men '97. And their arts festival actually just finished. And there was a bunch of artwork there. Matt actually got to come down here for MegaCon, and we saw a whole bunch of Wolverine and X-Men art and all sorts of Marvel and Star Wars art. So even though we can only have Guardians of the Galaxy here in Florida, they still sell all this stuff. Oh, wow. And obviously, if you go over to Islands of Adventure, I'm sure they're selling it too. I haven't been to Universal probably 6 months. But
at every Comic-Con, you see like the X-Men animated series, like everyone's dressed up like the Rogues and the things like that from that series.
The Hasbro VHS tape toy box toy that came out. We're friends with Dan Wiesenmeyer, the artist who did the great artwork on this, who was an artist on the animated series originally. A storyboard artist, and way back. He's in Florida now, and we hear from him how the success of this run, well, anything, but yeah. If you're curious, somebody that's local, I see Dan. I think he's near Orlando. I think he is, yeah. And Dan, and I think he does a lot of cons down there too, but and has his art available. But just it's so cool. Just great to hear that. You'll see a lot of X-Men '97. There is a particular piece of art that is on a lot of T-shirts now, and he did that. He did that, and also now that he's got those for sale in his store in his shop. So.
Yeah, there's actually a comic book store at Universal's Islands of Adventure, so you can even buy comic books in there. So
wow.
I don't know if you've ever been there, but that whole area is all comic book themed, so it's going to look just like the cartoons. So they have the Xavier in the yellow wheelchair and all that. It's kind of cool because you go there and you get the comic book, and then you go to Disney and you get Guardians of the Galaxy. So
wow. Well, maybe sometime we'll have to try. Okay.
Well, sounds like a nice vacation.
There you go.
But all right, guys, thank you guys so much again. We really appreciate it. Everybody, thanks for hanging out with us. As always, follow Hops Geek News on Facebook. We have a Facebook page that's open to the public. Our Discord, Twitter, Instagram, all of that good stuff is where you can find us. Patreon.com/Hops Geek News if you want to support the show. And as always, we will see you guys next week. Lauren, enjoy your Puerto Rico trip. I will be at Awesome Con this past weekend now, so when this comes out, but I will be at GalaxyCon Richmond talking the comic books you should be reading at our first panel Friday night, and then Saturday night I will be doing a deep dive into the history of Batman. So be there. GalaxyCon Richmond is where you'll find us, and maybe to another con near you guys soon. We'll see everybody later. Cheers.